Welcome to Face Forward, the podcast, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the riveting world of clinical trial management. I am your host, Valerie Coveney, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey through the nuances of planning, executing, and navigating the clinical research landscape. We are thrilled to have a very special guest with us today. She has over 25 years experience in the clinical trial management industry. Our conversation will be around maintaining clear and consistent communication between sponsor, the CRO, and sites, focusing on the following points: economics of communication, optimized delivery channels, and finally, personalization of communication. Let's extend a warm welcome to Laura Tomat, Senior Director in Project Management at Innovaderm. Thank you for being here, Laura.
Hi, Valerie. Thank you for having me today.
Okay, so Laura, as you know, communication is a common topic of conversation in clinical trials, and it has been discussed extensively. Why do you believe it is important to dedicate time to this subject in today's episode?
That's a great place to start today. Why communication? It's a topic that's covered a lot. However, I don't think we're ever really done exploring the topic because it's always evolving. As you know, I have 2 teenage boys at home, and all it takes is to sit down at the dinner table with them to really understand how communication is evolving. And if we're not going continuously exploring it, we're not going to keep up with what we need to keep up with. Now, let's bring that to clinical research. What does that mean for us in clinical research? So we dedicate a lot of our day to communication. We talk about project plans, we look at milestones, timelines, we have escalation pathways, we have a ton of different types of meetings, kickoff meetings, investigator meetings. You know, communication is essential and it's what we do every single day. So why are we talking about effective communication between sponsors, CRO, and sites? It's because we all have very different needs, different priorities, and we have to make sure that our goal of transparency, optimizing communication, personalizing communication, making sure it's high quality and consistency. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Amazing. So let's dive right in, shall we? So what do you mean by the economics of communication?
This is a term that I enjoy using. You know, when we think about economics, going back to our high school days when we used to see those cost benefit graphs all the time, you know, we know that there's that sweet spot on the graph where when we're doing something, as we continue to do it, there's a benefit. But then we get to a point in time that beyond that, the benefit decreases and the costs increase. You know, there's that old cliche saying time is money. But I really want to take this idea further than that. And really what I mean about the economics of communication is that our communication needs to be informative, but it also needs to be concise and accurate. And that's the balance we're trying to reach so that the person receiving the information is really at that sweet spot and really benefiting from it without the cost. We can use an example, and the example could be when we're communicating with our sites. So the amount of time that the site is taking communicating with us, the CRO, the site is not spending that time communicating with their patients. And that's really what we want them to do. We want them to take care of the patients. So it's up to us to communicate accurately, consistently, and very concisely. That's really vital so that we're really hitting that benefit point and the site is doing what they need to do, which is serving their patients safely and quickly. Very similarly with sponsors. You know, we have to make sure that we're communicating with our sponsors in a way that's informative, personalized, because as we're spending time communicating with them, they're not spending time advancing to the next step in what they need to be doing to get the therapy to the patients. That's what I talk about when I talk about the economics of communication, making sure that we're doing all that we can to benefit our sites and our sponsors so that it's not a cost to them.
Okay, so let's explore the delivery channels you mentioned earlier.
Sure. So what I meant by this is there's so many different ways to communicate and deliver information. We have email and video conferences. We have lots of different platforms that allow collaborative sharing of documents, a lot of different project management software. And I already talked about the meetings, lots of different types of meetings. Not to mention different kinds of visual communication. We communicate using metrics and graphs and timelines and infographics. But what really works for us and for our sites doesn't necessarily work for our sponsors, and vice versa. Each have their unique needs, and it goes really above and beyond what we traditionally think of as communication. We need different delivery channels that really take into account the sites and the sponsors' lived reality. And that's really what I mean by delivery channels. So if we think about, for an example, the site's lived reality, when we're communicating with a site, the people in the site are not in front of a computer. They're in front of a patient. They're probably in a clinical setting. Who knows? Maybe they're in the emergency room. I've worked on trials where they've been in the operating room. So we really have to think about the channels of communication we're using with our sites to deliver our message to them in their reality, in a clear, timely, and accurate way. And we have to think about, do we need to make our message adaptable to smartphones or a tablet? I remember the days that we used pocket cards. And there's always paper as well. We talk a lot about EDCs and ECOAs and ePros. Well, let's make sure that we're delivering those in a way that works for the site. Very similarly, and on the other side, we have the sponsors that have a very, very different lived reality as well that we really need to address and communicate using channels that work for them. So they need information in real time. And they want to see metrics. They want to track things. They might want to track timelines. They might want to track recruitment. And we also have to really be agile and responsive to delivering information in different ways at different times through the trial. What comes to mind is activities leading up to a database lock, for an example. We need to make sure that we're using our delivery channels that are going to get dynamic, changing, accurate information to the client that's real time and up to the minute. Whatever delivery channels we're using, we're always keeping in mind things like confidentiality and security as we're adapting to these sort of real-time issues that come up. Most of all, we need to know our audience, our sponsors, and our sites, and we need to know what works for them to receive the communication that we're trying to get to them. And that's what I mean by delivery channels.
So with so many communication methods available, how can you personalize communication between sponsors, CROs, and sites?
This is a great question. And when I'm thinking about personalized communication, really I'm talking about meeting the needs of the listener and telling the story that your audience needs to hear. We hear about AI all the time. And AI is changing the conversation. It's changing how we're experiencing the conversation. It's automating communication. But we need to maintain consistent, vetted, quality communication. So that's why, even though AI is definitely the future and we're all moving in that direction, we need to ensure even more now that the conversation stays personal. So that's where I'm going with understanding the needs of the listener. And even more so, telling the right story to the right audience. Getting the correct message to the correct people. An example is making sure that we have colleagues on both sides of the table speaking the same language to each other. We could be having a meeting with the sponsor, and if they want to talk about our data quality, we need to make sure to have our data management team at the table with their data management team, both speaking the same language, sharing the same information. So when we talk about personalized communication, we need to think about the situation where urgent information needs to reach the right listeners. We need to think about accuracy and quality and personalized messaging. The sites, we need to be concise. The sponsors, we need to be making sure that we're talking what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. Communicating with sponsors and sites while maintaining clear and consistent communication is ultimately about understanding our partnership, aligning our goals and expectations, and being agile along the way.
Definitely. So this brings an end to our episode today. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking part in this conversation. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
It was so lovely speaking with you today. Thank you so much, Valerie.
As we conclude another illuminating episode of Face Forward, we find ourselves at the crossroads of science and progress. Remember that behind the jargon and statistics lie stories of unwavering commitment, meticulous observation, and the pursuit of evidence that shapes our understanding of health and disease. Stay at the forefront of knowledge and innovation and follow Face Forward on your preferred platform. My name is Valerie Kovney. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.